Welcome back with Podcast with a Student and with me, lescamilla. How do you fare today? Buenos días, buenas tardes o noches, ¿cómo va todo? Have you guessed the language? Did you understand which tongue is that? Can you answer me? If you guess, you will say that language is Spanish or Castilian, Español o Castellano. This episode is going to be the first part of maybe 2 or 3 chapters of Spanish because there is a lot of information about this amazing tongue. Stay tuned to the next episode. But what are we going to hear in this new lesson? We are going to hear how Spanish evolved from Latin, his root with Arabic, difference between other Roman languages, a little bit of history of how it was expanded Spanish in the Iberian Peninsula, and another facts. How did Spanish or Castilian emerge? The Romans settled on the peninsula is about 200 BC, bringing their spoken language with them. This was not the classical Latin that we associate with fine and arts and religion today. Instead, they spoke a more common, cruder form of Latin, known as Vulgar Latin. During the Roman Empire, the Latin language was the official language of the peninsula, called Hispania, but it mixed with the local languages of the inhabitants, including Celts and Iberian, and began to take on its own unique flavor. The year 700, a poor and dark year for Western Europe culture, was not so far for other regions of the world. In the eastern, China was ruled by Empress Wu, the first and only woman to have ruled such an important country, and she did so at a time of cultural and political violence. To the west, in the lands of present-day Mexico, the city of Tenochtitlan, the place where men could become God, still enjoyed great splendor. But the situation on the peninsula could not be described as splendid, far from it. In the 8th century, Visigoth Hispania was plunged into a serious crisis, which revealed both its political weakness and the decline of its culture, with a very vulgar and diverse Latin, which was not well known even by the clergy. After the vertiginous collapse of the Visigothic kingdom and the subsequent submission of the peninsula to Muslim power, points of Christian resistance soon emerged in the north. The outline of the panorama of the First Castile allows us to address this issue that interests us, the formation of Spanish as a linguistic variety. When was Spanish spoken for the first time as a recognizable linguistic variety? The truth is that the first known mention in Latin is from the 12th century, since throughout the Middle Ages it was normal to speak of Romans, Roman, or Vulgar. The word Castilian did not start to be used with consistently until the Alfonsi period, but not precisely like popular denomination, but as a consequence of the translation and writing task of the royal desk of his chancery. During the 9th century and the beginning of the 10th, different languages coexist on the linguistic borders of the Castile. To the south, Arabic and Berber, together with the Andalusian Romance. To the east, the Rioja and the Aragonese Navarrese and the Basque, a 100-year-old neighborhood who justified bilingual and Basque Romance speakers. To the west, Asturias and immediately Leon, besides the Hebrew of the Jewish, or the Latin's T, nit, noite, nueite, nuit, and it is that the Spanish had from very early on a different personality with respect to its surrounding varieties. Some attribute precisely to the linguistic lack of culture of those first Castilian speakers, a lack of culture that led them to say Iniestra or enero, when all the varieties kept a consonant of the beginning of the word, ginesta and giner in Catalan, fiesta and janeiro in Galician and Portuguese, or saying hijo or noche when the normal thing was keeping the F sound, fil, filo, fillo. Other settles and languages began to filter into the area, including Arabic, due to the Muslim rule of the peninsula between 711 and 1492. Between 711, the year of the invasion, and 1492, date of Granada's surrender, existed territories governed by Muslims in the Iberia Peninsula. It was almost 3 centuries of splendor of Al-Andalus. The long period of Arabic speaking presence in the peninsula and the border contact between the Romans and Arabic varieties over many centuries. According to a study by Rafael Lapesca, Arabic is the second constituent learned Spanish after Latin until the 16th century. The number of Arabisms in Spanish has risen to 400. Many linguistic Arabisms came to the peninsula with a new object and products, for example, acelgas in Spanish, Swiss charts in English, albaricoque in Spanish, apricot in English, alcachofas in Spanish, artichokes in English, berenjena in Spanish, aubergine or eggplant in English. In the field of war, the Arabic contribute alferez in English is ensign, which means standard bearer in the vanguard. Adalid in English is champion, which translates as a guide of the troops. In the construction theme, adobe or adobe, which is fire, clay, brick, or tabique, in English is parton, a thin wall. There are a bunch of Arabisms that are incorporated. Among those, we must not forget relate to science and technology. As a more relevant sample, I will highlight the word and mathematical concept of zero, the use of the x with the unknown value, the word figure, and of course the Arabic numerals, now universal. The words born and die, but they can revive and reincarnate. Arroba, it was used to in the origin Spanish. It came from the Spanish Arabic arub, which means quarter, applied to weight measurement. Now, at the end of the 19th century, a very simple event took place. The inclusion of the @ symbol on the keyboard of typewriters, precisely because of its utility in the commercial file. A century later, in 1970, it was chosen by computer programmer Ray Tomlinson to integrate into email address. Also today is used as a grammatical morpheme of the neutral gender or inclusive language in Spanish. In conclusion, the history the simple and uneducated Castilian people treasure some wonders that correspond to their language. The wonder of having emerged without interruption from Latin, the wonder of emerging from varieties of more power dominions, language, the wonder of making their own feature of language as a distinct linguistically as Arabic and Basque. Much of this information I have taken from the book The Wonderful History of Spanish, written by Francisco Moreno Fernandez and published by Instituto Cervantes y Espasa. Do you want to learn this magnificent language? What do you think the next episode is going to bring? You can follow me on my social networks that are here on the website, but if you tune me in another channel and on social media, I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, as well as YouTube, like Podcast with a Student. Stay tuned with this podcast. Goodbye.